The story revolves around Nabi, a beautiful woman who visits an art exhibition to support her boyfriend's artwork. However, when she arrives, she is taken aback to find out that the centerpiece of the exhibit is a sculpture of her boyfriend's naked body. Despite being taken aback, Nabi's flashback depicts a love story with her boyfriend Yu Hyonu. After several years of dating, Hyonu gives in to his sexual desires and pressures Nabi to sleep with him, using her love as an excuse. Nabi falls for it, only to realize that Hyonu was using her for his artwork. Initially, Nabi is infuriated with Hyonu, but her friend praises her boyfriend's artwork as a demonstration of his love, and Nabi begins to accept the situation. However, the day after the exhibition, someone informs Nabi that Hyonu is cheating on her with another woman. Nabi rushes to Hyonu's art studio and catches him red-handed with his mistress. Feeling betrayed, Nabi ends the relationship immediately. After several months, Nabi appears to have moved on from her past relationship and is now pursuing her art major at college. While accompanying her friend Bitna to the rooftop for a smoke break, Bitna suggests that Nabi try using dating apps to move on, but Nabi is uninterested. Bitna also encourages Nabi to hang out with some juniors who want to drink with her, but Nabi declines, as she is still recovering from her recent breakup. Flashbacks take us back to the time when Nabi ended her relationship. She was deeply saddened by her ex's infidelity when a handsome stranger approached her. Although Nabi did not recognize him, she was amazed by his good looks. The stranger mistook Nabi for someone else and invited her to join him on a blind date, but he later canceled it to spend time with Nabi instead. They had a great time together and connected as if they had known each other for years, even though they had just met. When the stranger made physical contact with Nabi, her heart skipped a beat, and she couldn't help but feel a spark between them. Travel back to the present where Nabi was chatting with her mother over the phone when she stumbled upon a familiar face, the handsome man she met a few days ago. To her surprise, he was passionately kissing a woman, which caught Nabi off guard. Before she could even confirm what she saw, they vanished into thin air. Nabi then noticed a butterfly tattoo on her arm, which the charming man had drawn during their encounter. He had shared his love for butterflies and even got one inked on his neck. As they conversed, the young man asked Nabi to fulfill a request, but his teasing nature provoked Nabi to be playful. Later, as they stepped outside for some fresh air, he offered her a cigarette which she initially refused, but later accepted when a woman approached him for one. It turned out to be Nabi's first cigarette, and their eyes locked in a moment of intensity. He leaned in for a kiss, but Nabi gently turned away, considering it too early, and excused herself to the restroom. Upon returning, Nabi overheard the young man on the phone, expressing how much he missed the person on the other end. Assuming he had a girlfriend, Nabi decided to leave and not interfere. Fast forward to the present day, Nabi is contemplating participating in a student exchange program and notices that Yoon Sol, a fellow student from a different department, is also interested. Seeking guidance, Nabi consulted with her professor, Professor So, who informed her that she had not met the program's requirements yet. In contrast, Yoon Sol had met all the criteria, but she remained indecisive about joining the program. Leaving Professor So's office, Yoon Sol was met by her closest friend, So Ji-won, who probed about the reasons for her visit. Yoon Sol kept mum about her plans to join the student exchange, and their tight bond could be why she hesitates to leave. As Nabi headed back to class, she stumbled upon a junior student's project, which piqued her interest. Yet, she couldn't shake off the stress of the student exchange program. Sensing Nabi's unease, Bitna extended an invitation to grab drinks together. However, knowing that Nabi would be working late, Bitna left the decision up to her. In the afternoon, Nabi stumbled upon the young man she met before while running errands at a convenience store. She tried to approach him, but he vanished into thin air. Later that day, she had a change of heart and contacted Bitna. While in evening, Nabi was shocked to come face to face with the handsome young man from earlier, Jae-yeon. They reconnected, and Nabi couldn't believe it was fate. The air between them was awkward, and Bitna sensed something was up, suspecting that they already knew each other. Panicking, Nabi denied it, and Jae-yeon played along, pretending that they were meeting for the first time. In another part of town, Yoon Sol was hanging out with her friends, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was missing. It was Ji-won, who was apparently off doing her own thing. Yoon Sol's discomfort only grew when the conversation turned to Ji-won's popularity with boys. As Yoon Sol tried to take their order, her mind was elsewhere and she accidentally bumped into a man, spilling his coffee. She felt terrible and immediately apologized to the young man. Meanwhile, Nabi and her friends were having a good time when she noticed Jae-yeon. He caught her eye and she found herself increasingly interested in him. But her attraction quickly faded when she saw how he charmed the waiter who brought their food. It was clear to her that Jae-yeon was the kind of guy who could make any woman fall for him. Nabi didn't want to get involved with the player, so she decided to leave. However, as she went back to retrieve her things, Jae-yeon surprised her by offering to buy her ice cream. Despite her initial reservations, Nabi couldn't resist Jae-yeon's invitation to get ice cream together. As they talked, Jae-yeon playfully teased Nabi about pretending not to recognize him earlier, and she couldn't deny that she was happy to see him again. Things quickly heated up when Jae-yeon ran his fingers through Na-bi's hair, causing her to lose her cool. When they returned to the drinking event, they couldn't stop stealing glances and smiling at each other. Meanwhile, Yoon-sol was still feeling guilty about spilling coffee on the young man earlier. In an attempt to make amends, she gave him her number and he accepted it. As the drinking event came to an end, Na-bi and her colleagues headed home. But when Jae-yeon's phone beeped with a notification, Na-bi couldn't help but wonder if he had a girlfriend. Even when she got home, she couldn't stop thinking about their interactions from their first meeting to the drinking event. Na-bi was thrilled to learn that Jae-yeon would be at the next drinking event and couldn't wait to see him again. As Jae-yeon was on his way home, he received a sudden call from someone and had to rush off to meet them. Na-bi was confused and couldn't stop overthinking, causing her to have trouble sleeping that night. The next day, Na-bi went looking for Jae-yeon but couldn't find him. Desperate to see him again, she asked Bitna why Jae-yeon's name wasn't in the group. Bitna explained that Jae-yeon had paid the bill himself, which was why his name wasn't listed. When they decided to grab a bite to eat, Na-bi convinced them to let her go look for Jae-yeon. As soon as Na-bi arrived at the campus, her eyes were immediately drawn to a beautiful artwork. Little did she know that the artist behind the masterpiece was none other than Jae-yeon, who coincidentally was present at the scene. Na-bi tried to play it cool, pretending to search for something, but all she really wanted was to catch a glimpse of Jae-yeon. However, her nerves were getting the best of her because Jae-yeon was known for being a heartthrob among the girls. As Na-bi was lost in her thoughts, she suddenly felt someone's gaze on her. To her surprise, it was Jae-yeon, who had been looking at her. Na-bi was taken aback by Jae-yeon's attention, but she couldn't help but feel flattered. In a moment of spontaneity, Na-bi took out her paints and started to paint Jae-yeon's face, much to his dismay. But the two ended up laughing and having a good time, which caught the attention of Yoon-sol and Ji-won. Yoon-sol and Ji-won saw the chemistry between Na-bi and Jae-yeon and decided to give them some privacy. Jae-yeon and Na-bi spent some time together as she worked on her project, with Jae-yeon sketching her in the meantime. As they stepped outside to get some fresh air, Jae-yeon helped Na-bi stretch her back, but the situation unexpectedly turned into a romantic moment, leaving Na-bi flustered once again. The conversation shifted to Na-bi's plans to participate in a student exchange program, and Jae-yeon asked for her number so they could stay in touch. Na-bi was once again enchanted by Jae-yeon's butterfly-shaped gas lighter and smiled happily when she saw it. This made Jae-yeon want to kiss her, but Na-bi dodged his attempt. Jae-yeon then suggested they go out for drinks and try to kiss again, but their plans were interrupted by a phone call, causing Jae-yeon to cancel their plans abruptly. Bitna warned Na-bi about Jae-yeon's reputation as a playboy who likes to play with women's hearts. Bitna compared him to a flower that attracts many butterflies, warning Na-bi not to be easily swayed by his charms. Despite Bitna's warning, Na-bi agreed to meet with Jae-yeon for a meal. Jae-yeon reminded Na-bi of a bet she lost, and he wanted to use his request. He asked her to go to a nightclub with him, which made Na-bi nervous because she had never been to one before. Jae-yeon immediately noticed her discomfort and hugged her from behind to make her feel more comfortable. He began to kiss her hair, drawing Na-bi closer to him, and they eventually danced together. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and they almost kissed again, but Na-bi pulled away at the last moment, leaving Jae-yeon frustrated. Na-bi worked on her project while Jae-yeon drew her. When they took a break for fresh air, Jae-yeon held Na-bi and accidentally created a romantic moment between them. Despite this, Na-bi kept her distance when Jae-yeon wanted to kiss her. The next day, Bitna warned Na-bi that Jae-yeon was a playboy who liked to play with women. Jae-yeon asked Na-bi to go to a nightclub together and they danced, but Na-bi suspected Jae-yeon's intentions when she met a woman who knew him. Jae-yeon tried to explain the woman's presence, but Na-bi still had doubts about him. However, Jae-yeon's kind gesture when Na-bi fell made her surprised and he invited her to eat together. Despite her suspicions, Na-bi smiled when Jae-yeon called her. The next day, Na-bi woke up to find herself alone in her bed, still dreaming of the passionate encounter with Jae-yeon. She checked her phone and saw a missed call from him, making her wonder if the dream was a premonition of things to come. Rushing to her class, Na-bi discovered that she had missed the morning lecture and now had to attend the afternoon class. To her surprise, Jae-yeon was also in the same class and she tried to avoid him. But he spotted her and came over to say hello before sitting next to her. On the flip side, Yoon-sol got in touch with the man she accidentally bumped into at the cafe. He wanted to meet her and asked her out for a drink. Yoon-sol was curious about this guy and agreed to the invitation. Meanwhile, Na-bi was struggling with her menstrual cycle, leaving her feeling weak and uncomfortable. Her discomfort caused her to act coldly towards Jae-yeon, and he couldn't help but notice the change in her demeanor. Feeling hurt, he distanced himself from Na-bi. The next day, Na-bi had to present in class, but her period had gotten the best of her, leaving her with an embarrassing stain. Jae-yeon, who had realized what was going on, quickly came to her aid. He stopped her from leaving the classroom and offered his jacket to cover up the stain. Nabi couldn't help but fall for Jae-yeon's kind nature, and their relationship grew even closer. However, her friend Bitna cautioned her to be careful, as she knew Jae-yeon had a reputation for being a womanizer. Bitna invited Nabi out for drinks and promised her that there would be a special guest joining them. Later that evening, Nabi was scrolling through Jae-yeon's social media and became upset when she noticed that he only followed other girls. It dawned on her that she wasn't the only one vying for Jae-yeon's attention. Feeling confused and overwhelmed, Nabi reached out to Bitna and asked to join the drinking party with the others. Meanwhile, Bitna was hanging out with her friends Nam Kyu-hyun and Yoo Se-hoon. Kyu-hyun admitted that he had a huge crush on Yoon-sol and even asked Yoon-sol's best friend Ji-won to invite her out for drinks. To everyone's surprise, Yoon-sol accepted the invitation, even though she's usually not interested in those types of events. However, when Ji-won started asking Yoon-sol about Se-hoon, Yoon-sol replied that he looked cute. This made Ji-won visibly annoyed. Later that night, Nabi arrived at the drinking party and was warmly welcomed by her friends. However, the conversation quickly turned to the charming Jae-yeon, which made Nabi feel a little insecure, as she knew he was popular with the ladies. As they started drinking, Nabi accidentally grabbed the wrong glass, which belonged to her junior Kim Yoon-han, who seemed quite taken with her. Just then, Jae-yeon arrived and made an effort to lift Nabi's spirits. But the drunken man next to her kept rambling on, making the atmosphere uncomfortable. To ease Nabi's discomfort, Jae-yeon ordered her a special drink, which they had enjoyed together at the club before. As Nabi, Bitna, and Jae-yeon took a smoke break, a drunkard stumbled over and blurted out that Nabi and Jae-yeon seemed to have a thing for each other. But when Jae-yeon denied any involvement with Nabi, she left abruptly, feeling disheartened. Bitna, who usually urged caution, surprised Nabi by suggesting they bring Jae-yeon home. Bitna claimed Jae-yeon's behavior towards Nabi was different, and he might actually have feelings for her. Meanwhile, Jae-yeon remained angry with the drunkard, who had previously been rejected by Nabi and was now badmouthing her. As Nabi and Jae-yeon headed to a restaurant, she asked why he wasn't dating anyone. Jae-yeon replied that he wanted to take things slow before committing. Nabi wasted no time and invited him over to her place with the rest of the group. They had a blast playing games and goofing around. When they played a kissing game, the first couple made out passionately. The noise from their revelry even annoyed Nabi's neighbors, but when they caught a glimpse of handsome Jae-yeon, they let it slide without complaint. As the bottle game continued, it pointed at Nabi and Jae-yeon. Instead of kissing, they chose to take a punishment. After the game, while cleaning up, they heard kissing noises coming from the room. It turned out to be the first couple who had made out earlier. Embarrassed, they begged Nabi to keep it a secret. Later, Nabi stepped outside for some air and caught Jae-yeon kissing another woman. He noticed Nabi watching and immediately invited the woman inside. Nabi was heartbroken, but Jae-yeon explained that he was only trying to help the woman because she hadn't been chosen in the game before. Despite his earlier actions, Jae-yeon attempted to kiss Nabi. At first, she was hesitant, but when she saw lipstick marks from other women on his lips, she immediately cleaned them off and kissed him passionately. The intense kiss left Nabi still thinking about it as they all fell asleep. When Jae-yeon woke up and caught Nabi gazing at him, they shared a moment of intense eye contact. The following day, Yoon-sol and Ji-won discussed how perfect Nabi and Jae-yeon were for each other while enjoying a meal together. Nabi was frantically scrolling through the internet, searching for any information on kisses that make a person's heart race. She was torn between two options, either continuing a date or ending the relationship altogether. As she pondered this dilemma, Yoon-sol approached her while smoking. Nabi immediately turned to Yoon-sol and asked her about the elusive heart-pounding kiss. Yoon-sol reluctantly admitted that she had never experienced it before. Meanwhile, Jae-yeon was lost in his art when he received a message from Yoon-sol, who informed him that she was already on the plane. Nabi couldn't get the memory of her steamy kiss with Jae-yeon out of her head, and she anxiously waited for news from him. However, there was no word from Jae-yeon, leaving Nabi feeling confused and uncertain about their relationship. In another part of town, Yoon-sol had a chance encounter with Jung Joo-hyuk, the man who had contacted her the day before. They decided to grab a meal together, but Yoon-sol insisted on paying. However, Joo-hyuk refused, wanting to treat her to the meal. Despite feeling uncomfortable, Yoon-sol tried to pay again, but Joo-hyuk refused once more and suggested that she use the money for something else. Meanwhile, Nabi attended her art class with her fellow students. She couldn't help but notice that most of them were single and didn't have a partner. Professor So pointed out that couples could come up with brilliant artwork ideas even if their relationship was just a one-night stand. Nabi couldn't help but feel like this was a reflection of her own situation with Jae-yeon. As she wrestled with her feelings, Jae-yeon went to the airport to pick up Sol-ah. Ji-won was out with her boyfriend, enjoying a casual stroll and conversation when she spotted Yoon-sol and Joo-hyuk together. Irritated by the sight, she quickly changed the subject and kept walking, trying to shake off her annoyance. Meanwhile, Nabi was consumed by doubts about Jae-yeon's true feelings for her. She felt compelled to find him, and after a long search, she finally located him working on his project. Unfortunately, their reunion was cut short when Sol-ah called Jae-yeon and asked him to meet her. Nabi watched from a distance as the two of them interacted, growing increasingly jealous as she saw Sola embrace Jae-yoon's hand. She couldn't shake the feeling that Jae-yoon had been playing with her all along. As Nabi was picking up some food at the minimarket, she was surprised to see Yoon-han working as the cashier. He had previously expressed interest in her and took the opportunity to ask for her phone number once again. Unbeknownst to her, Jae-yoon and Sola were observing the exchange from a distance. When Sola inquired about Nabi, Jae-yoon dismissively claimed that she was nobody. Sola also questioned him about his past behavior towards women, particularly the butterflies he had mistreated. Jae-yoon expressed remorse and insisted that Nabi was not just another butterfly to him, but rather his destiny. Meanwhile, Nabi received a message from Yoon-han and checked out his social media profile, finding him attractive. However, her thoughts were still consumed by Jae-yoon. The following day, Bitna asked Nabi about her relationship with Jae-yoon. Nabi admitted that they had broken up because they were not compatible. Bitna was surprised as she had thought they were a good match, even suspecting that they had kissed. However, Nabi lied and said it was just a made-up story. As they were talking, Yoon-han arrived and greeted Nabi. Bitna noticed that they seemed close, which made her wonder if something was going on between them. While Bitna was lost in thought, Yoon-han brought food for Nabi and revealed that he had seen her previous work, which was inspired by her former lover. Nabi admitted that she had thrown the work away, leaving Yoon-han surprised. Nabi asked Yoon-han to speak casually with her as they had grown closer. However, their plans to watch a movie together were interrupted when Jae-yoon showed up, feeling jealous. Nabi, fed up with Jae-yoon, asked him to leave and demanded to know the true nature of their relationship. Instead of answering, Jae-yoon wished Nabi happiness with Yoon-han. Annoyed, Nabi left and immediately invited Yoon-han to watch the movie together. After enjoying a meal and playing games, they settled down to watch the movie. Nabi started to feel at ease with Yoon-han, but her mood was dampened when she saw a photo of her and her ex-boyfriend. She realized that she still had lingering memories of him and couldn't enjoy the movie. Upon returning home, Yoon-han admitted to overhearing Nabi's conversation with Jae-yoon earlier and warned her to stay away from him as he was known for being a player. He then attempted to kiss Nabi, but his nervousness caused her to burst out laughing. Despite still having feelings for both Jae-yoon and Yoon-han, Nabi decided to delete Jae-yoon's contact in order to move on. The following day, Nabi overheard another art student talking about Yoon-sol, who had just been scolded for not giving an answer about an exchange student program she had participated in. Ji-won was surprised to hear this news, as Yoon-sol had kept it a secret from her. Nabi tried to calm Ji-won down. Nabi explained Yoon-sol's problem to Ji-won as they headed to the second-hand market. Ji-won had been Yoon-sol's friend for a long time and even entered college with her because of their shared love for art. Although Ji-won was saddened by Yoon-sol's impending departure, she vowed to continue supporting her friend. At the campus festival that night, Nabi and Ji-won joined the others and were surprised to see Jae-yoon there. But Nabi chose to focus on Yoon-han and was about to approach him when another woman suddenly appeared and hugged him. This made Nabi feel embarrassed, especially when she saw Jae-yoon witnessing the scene. She quickly left the area. Ji-won's friends were taken aback when they noticed that Yoon-sol wasn't with her as they were inseparable. Ji-won disclosed that they were no longer close. Later, Yoon-sol arrived with Joo-hyuk, which irked Ji-won even more, especially when she saw them playing a game meant for couples. Ji-won lashed out at Yoon-sol and stormed off, leaving her bewildered. Meanwhile, Nabi wasn't feeling well and decided to head home, still mortified by the awkward encounter with Yoon-han in front of Jae-yoon. Before long, Jae-yoon contacted her and revealed that he was aware of Nabi deleting his number. He suggested meeting up and said he was nearby her house. Nabi's phone died abruptly and she was unable to continue her conversation with Jae-yoon. She tried to purchase medicine but returned home empty-handed when her attempts proved futile. However, as soon as she reached her house, she was greeted by an ambulance parked outside her door. The paramedics were on the verge of breaking down her bedroom door, thinking that there was an emergency situation. It turned out that Jae-yoon had intentionally alerted the ambulance services as he became concerned when Nabi's phone suddenly went off. Learning about Nabi's sickness only added to his worries. However, Nabi was still upset with Jae-yoon, and her frigid demeanor towards him made it clear that she did not want to be taken for granted. Meanwhile, Bitna's drunken behavior had upset Kyu-hyun. However, things took a surprising turn when the inebriated Bitna began showering Kyu-hyun with compliments, calling him handsome. This prompted Kyu-hyun to make a move and lean in for a kiss. Meanwhile, Nabi was feeling remorseful for her behavior towards Jae-yoon earlier. As she was getting ready for bed, Jae-yoon surprised her by arriving at her doorstep with medicine and food. Initially hesitant, Nabi eventually accepted Jae-yoon's offer as he insisted on taking care of her. Jae-yoon tenderly took care of the sick Nabi, carrying her to bed and regaling her with fairy tales. He also confessed his jealousy when Nabi was with Yoon-han and revealed that he had been interested in her since they first met. The morning after, Nabi woke up to find Jae-yoon still sleeping beside her. They shared a romantic moment when Jae-yoon offered to tie Na-bi's hair, and soon they were making out and spent the night together. As they hugged each other, Na-bi began to question whether she was falling in love with Jae-yoon. Meanwhile, Bitna and Kyu-hyun also slept together in a hotel room. However, Bitna soon asked Kyu-hyun to forget what happened and brushed it off as a mistake. This hurt Kyu-hyun, who had developed feelings for Bitna and left her after realizing that she didn't feel the same way. The following day, Jae-yoon rushed back to campus with the intention of meeting Na-bi. However, Na-bi misunderstood his intentions and assumed that he was only interested in sleeping with her. Meanwhile, Bitna was having a meal when Kyu-hyun approached her and asked about their relationship. Bitna quickly clarified that they were not dating and that their previous encounter was merely a mistake. Kyu-hyun was devastated by this rejection but chose to conceal his heartbreak and accept Bitna's decision. On campus, Sehun had a crush on Yoon-sol, but when he asked Ji-won about her relationship with Yoon-sol, Ji-won became upset and stormed off. Yoon-sol tried to talk to Ji-won and was met with hostility because Ji-won believed that Yoon-sol was hiding something from her. Despite Yoon-sol's attempts to ease the tension, Ji-won remained angry and continued to accuse Yoon-sol of being deceptive. Even when Yoon-sol insisted that they were just friends, Ji-won's frustration only grew. Meanwhile, Na-bi and Jae-yoon had agreed to keep their relationship a secret. Later that evening, Na-bi prepared herself to spend a romantic evening with Jae-yoon, only to find out that he wanted to study human anatomy instead. This left Na-bi confused about Jae-yoon's true intentions. After a night of studying, Na-bi and Jae-yoon continued their secret romantic relationship until the morning. This became a regular occurrence as they pretended to be just friends during the day in front of others. A few days later, Na-bi's friends noticed a change in her behavior and asked if she had a boyfriend. Na-bi quickly avoided the question. Meanwhile, one of Na-bi's friends expressed interest in Kyu-hyun, which upset Bitna. Bitna didn't think they were a good match and believed that their relationship wouldn't work out. One evening, Jae-yoon and Na-bi spent time learning to dance together. Jae-yoon then invited Na-bi to an exhibition, but she had to decline due to a busy schedule. Unbeknownst to Jae-yoon, it was actually Na-bi's birthday, and she planned to celebrate with a special someone during the semester break. Na-bi hesitated to invite Jae-yoon because they were not officially a couple. The following day, Na-bi saw Jae-yoon on the phone with another woman, Sola. Na-bi realized she wasn't the only woman Jae-yoon was pursuing. It turned out that Jae-yoon had gone out with Sola, but only talked about Na-bi, which made Sola feel jealous. As Na-bi rode the bus alone, she felt a pang of regret for not being able to attend the exhibition with Jae-yoon. But fate had something else in store for her. As she stepped off the bus, she was greeted by an old friend from her childhood, Yang Do-hyuk. Na-bi couldn't believe her luck. Do-hyuk had grown into a kind and charming young man who had opened up his own restaurant. Since they were heading in the same direction, Na-bi decided to pay him a visit. As they walked, the rain started pouring down, but Do-hyuk came to the rescue with an umbrella. He even insisted on driving her all the way home to keep her safe and dry. As they talked and reminisced about old times, Na-bi couldn't help but feel a sense of comfort in Do-hyuk's company. When they arrived at her doorstep, Do-hyuk selflessly left his umbrella with her and braved the rain alone. Na-bi's birthday started off on a sour note when she found her mother in the company of a strange man. Disheartened by the turn of events, Na-bi felt like it was the worst possible way to celebrate her special day. However, fate had something else in store for her. Out of the blue, Jae-yoon appeared and offered to take her to the exhibition, bringing a smile to Na-bi's face. To make things even better, Jae-yoon surprised her with a thoughtful gift and promised to cook her some delicious food. Unfortunately, their culinary plans were thwarted when they realized that Jae-yoon had no cooking skills. Instead, they decided to spend some quality time together and ended up making out. But just as things were heating up, Jae-yoon received a call from Sola, leaving Na-bi in a state of confusion about the nature of their relationship. Bitna found herself on a date with a man, but her attention was quickly diverted when she spotted Kyu-hyun cozying up to another woman at a nearby restaurant. Fueled by jealousy, Bitna couldn't resist confronting Kyu-hyun, even though she had previously decided against becoming his girlfriend. Meanwhile, Jae-yoon had left to meet Sola, leaving Na-bi feeling hungry and alone. As luck would have it, she stumbled upon Do-hyuk's restaurant. Na-bi was surprised to find out that the cooking video she had been watching was made by Do-hyuk himself. Without hesitation, Do-hyuk invited Na-bi inside and whipped up a delicious meal for her. To her surprise, Do-hyuk even remembered Na-bi's birthday and celebrated with her while reminiscing about their childhood memories. The next day, Na-bi was getting ready for class and decided to wear the clothes that Jae-yoon had given her. As soon as she arrived on campus, Jae-yoon called her and asked to meet up. They met in front of the campus, and Na-bi couldn't help but ask about the candy that Jae-yoon had eaten. Without any hesitation, Jae-yoon kissed her on the lips so she could taste the candy for herself. Little did they know, their intimate moment was witnessed by their friends, and rumors about their relationship quickly spread throughout the campus. As they went to class, everyone could see a clear change in their behavior towards each other, and it became apparent that they were dating. Meanwhile, Kyu-hyun, who had shown an interest in Nabi before, started to act cold and distant, which made her feel frustrated and confused. Things took a turn for the worse when Nabi's ex-boyfriend warned her about Jae-yoon's reputation as a player. He tried to convince her that Jae-yoon was not a good person and that she should stay away from him. As the gossip continued to spread, Nabi started to question whether she should continue dating Jae-yoon or not. Despite her feelings for him, Nabi eventually decided to end things with Jae-yoon. Nabi's heart was heavy as she met Jae-yoon, knowing that she had to end their relationship. She couldn't help but ask him if he was seeing other women, to which he replied that she was the only one for him. Just as Nabi was about to break the news to him, a man suddenly attacked Jae-yoon, causing chaos in the streets. Nabi tried to intervene, but the man pushed her to the ground, injuring her in the process. Furious, Jae-yoon fought back and managed to get the upper hand. Yoon-sol and Ji-won, who had heard the commotion, rushed to the scene and called the police. After everything had settled down, the two girls left, leaving Nabi and Jae-yoon alone in front of the police station. It was then that the man who had attacked Jae-yoon approached them and warned Nabi not to get involved with Jae-yoon, revealing that he had hurt his younger sister before. Feeling overwhelmed and confused by all the rumors surrounding Jae-yoon, Nabi decided to end things with him. To her surprise, Jae-yoon was understanding and accepted her decision without any protest. Nabi was feeling increasingly frustrated with Jae-yoon's lack of sadness after their breakup. Everywhere she turned, his name seemed to be on everyone's lips, and she was sick of hearing about him. Even on campus, when her friends brought him up, she begged them to stop. Meanwhile, Jae-yoon was taking matters into his own hands. He visited the younger sister of the man who had beaten him up the day before, and she apologized for her brother's behavior. Elsewhere, Bitna had a chance encounter with Kyu-hyun, who was out on a date with another woman. Bitna couldn't help but feel jealous when she saw Kyu-hyun eating mint chocolate ice cream with the other woman. As evening fell, Nabi was shocked to see Jae-yoon walking towards her, but he didn't even acknowledge her presence and walked right past her. Nabi couldn't understand why Jae-yoon's attitude towards her had changed so suddenly. She found it hard to focus on anything, even during lectures. Meanwhile, Bitna's ongoing frustration with Kyu-hyun led to her lecturer becoming suspicious of their relationship. The lecturer approached Yoon-sol, accusing her of not participating in a student exchange program, which upset Ji-won as she felt Yoon-sol was hiding something from her once again. As Nabi arrived home, she couldn't help but reminisce about her time with Jae-yoon, and she realized that she still had all the gifts he had given her. Feeling overwhelmed, she decided to call Jae-yoon to return them, only to discover that he had changed his phone number. Meanwhile, Jae-yoon found himself feeling uneasy while tending to his butterflies in the garden, unable to shake off his thoughts about Nabi. The same was true for Nabi, who woke up every morning with the habit of looking at Jae-yoon's face. As Jae-yoon prepared to leave for campus, he remembered how much Nabi loved his hairstyle with his bangs down, so he decided to wear it that way just for her. Later on, Nabi and Jae-yoon crossed paths again, and they both noticed each other's new looks. They even talked briefly about the necklace Jae-yoon had given her, but their conversation was cut short when he received a call from Sola. Jae-yoon had to leave, leaving Nabi feeling disappointed once again. Jae-yoon rushed to the hospital to see Sola, who was undergoing treatment for her illness. Despite their close relationship, it became apparent that Jae-yoon's feelings for Sola were limited to empathy. Nabi was on her way to Do-hyuk's shop to share some news about the upcoming presentation. As she arrived, Do-hyuk surprised her with a beautiful lipstick that immediately brought a smile to her face. Do-hyuk's father, Mr. An, noticed the undeniable chemistry between the two, especially when Do-hyuk was always grinning from ear to ear whenever Nabi was around. To add to Nabi's excitement, Mr. An offered her a free heart-shaped meal. Meanwhile, Kyu-hyun was out enjoying the fresh air when he received a distressing call from Se-hoon. Se-hoon needed Bitna's address because she was in a drunken stupor. Kyu-hyun jumped into action and immediately went to Bitna's rescue. When he arrived, Bitna was in a semi-conscious state and expressed her frustration towards Kyu-hyun, who had been acting distant lately. Kyu-hyun finally admitted that his strange behavior was due to his stress from thinking about Bitna constantly. They shared a passionate kiss, and at that moment, they both knew they wanted to be together. They decided to start dating and give their relationship a chance. The day of the presentation had finally arrived, and Nabi was getting ready to deliver it with nerves and excitement. Just as she was about to leave, Ji-won arrived to offer some words of encouragement. Nabi felt a surge of confidence and stepped out into the world feeling ready to conquer it. As she walked down the street, she bumped into Jae-yoon once again. Although she was surprised to see him, her heart skipped a beat as they exchanged a few pleasantries. Before she could say more, her phone rang, and it was Do-hyuk on the other end, wishing her luck for her presentation. It was a welcome boost of positivity that put her at ease. Out of nowhere, Jae-yoon suddenly appeared, admitting that he was jealous of the man on the phone. He then went on to tell Nabi how beautiful she looked and how he preferred her hair tied up. His words caught Nabi off guard, and she couldn't help but feel flattered by his attention. During the presentations, Yoon-sol stood up and nervously delivered her project. Suddenly, Ji-won's voice boomed through the room with a resounding cheer, filling Yoon-sol with newfound confidence. However, when it was Nabi's turn to present, she couldn't help but feel a little uneasy when Jae-yeon appeared out of nowhere to watch her performance. After all the presentations were over, the selection of assistants began. As Nabi waited anxiously for her turn, Jae-yeon's hand shot up in the air, boldly offering himself up as her assistant. The other students were taken aback by his enthusiasm, but deep down they knew it was bound to happen. Alongside Jae-yeon, another junior art student named Jin-soon also volunteered to assist Nabi. After the presentations, they began dividing up the design and materials for their project. Jae-yeon had a wealth of materials that they needed, so he invited them to come to his place to work on it. When Sola tried calling Jae-yeon, he didn't answer his phone because he was working on the project with Nabi. Meanwhile, Jin-soon was running late, so the two of them were forced to work alone. During this time, Jae-yeon realized that he had been toying with Nabi's emotions, and he suddenly felt a strong urge to change his ways. He knew that he had found the right person in Nabi, and he wanted to stop being a playboy for good. Nabi, who overheard his confession, couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope that his words were genuine this time. As Sola anxiously waited for a response from Jae-yeon, he was preoccupied with working closely alongside Nabi on their project. When Nabi was about to leave, Ji-won slipped her a piece of paper with her new phone number on it. However, Jae-yeon's phone suddenly lit up with a flood of missed calls from Sola, causing him to panic and immediately call her back. By the time Sola arrived at Jae-yeon's house, she was already consumed with jealousy over the closeness between him and Nabi, and she ended up canceling their meeting. Meanwhile, Nabi threw herself into her work and stayed up all night working on her project. Her intense focus paid off, and she received glowing feedback from Professor So for the first time ever. As Nabi and Jae-yeon's relationship progressed, an unexpected encounter with Sola threatened to unravel everything. While Nabi was buying coffee, she accidentally bumped into Sola, causing her butterfly lighter to fall out of her purse. Sola immediately recognized the lighter as Jae-yeon's and deduced that the woman in front of her was Nabi. Sola didn't hold back and tried to provoke Nabi by telling her that she had come to campus just to see Jae-yeon because she missed him. Nabi countered by asking about Sola's current relationship with Jae-yeon, to which Sola revealed that they had rekindled their romance. This revelation left Nabi feeling disheartened and disappointed, believing that Jae-yeon hadn't really changed his playboy ways after all. The next day, Nabi suddenly disappeared and was nowhere to be found, leaving Jae-yeon confused and worried about her well-being. While at the hospital with Sola, Jae-yeon learns that he cannot reach Nabi and becomes increasingly worried. Unbeknownst to Jae-yeon, Sola knows the reason for Nabi's disappearance but chooses to keep it to herself as she plans to win back Jae-yeon's affection. Meanwhile, Jae-yeon's feelings for Nabi continue to grow and he relentlessly tries to contact her. Eventually, it's discovered that Nabi has gone on vacation to visit her aunt. During her trip, Nabi and her aunt reminisce about the past, and Nabi realizes that she had once harbored feelings for Do-hyuk when he had left for Seoul. Bitna and Kyu-hyun have started a secret romantic relationship, but Kyu-hyun wants to go public with their relationship, which Bitna is not comfortable with. Meanwhile, Nabi receives a call from Ji-won, who invites her to an art event. Nabi initially declines the invitation but agrees to come if Jae-yeon does not show up. Ji-won lies and tells Nabi that Jae-yeon is not coming to convince her to come. Despite Jae-yeon's attempts to reach out to Nabi, she continues to ignore his calls and messages. The following day, Nabi was taking a solitary stroll when Do-hyuk suddenly appeared in his car. He had heard from Nabi's aunt that she was in the area and had come to see her. Meanwhile, Kyu-hyun had just finished sleeping with Bitna when he noticed another man's call on her phone. Bitna quickly turned off the phone and claimed it was just an acquaintance, but Kyu-hyun's jealousy was aroused, and he began to suspect her. Back at the beach, Nabi and Do-hyuk were enjoying each other's company and the breathtaking view. As they chatted, Nabi asked Do-hyuk if he had a girlfriend. He posed the same question to her, and she gave the same answer because Jae-yeon had been lying to her. Later that evening, Nabi opened up about her ex-boyfriend, and Do-hyuk almost gave up on winning her heart. However, he quickly revealed that Nabi was actually his first love and that he had planned to confess his feelings years ago when she went to Seoul. But he had backed out upon learning that she was already in a relationship. Nabi didn't remember ever mentioning having a boyfriend, and she confessed that she had lied to her friend at the time to avoid being teased about being single. As night fell, Nabi began to feel drowsy and fell asleep. Do-hyuk gently laid her down and covered her with a blanket, willing to spend the night outside in the cold to keep her comfortable. After a few days apart, Jae-yeon was still searching for Nabi on campus, haunted by memories of their time together. Kyu-hyun came to talk to him, and Jae-yeon confided in him about his feelings for Nabi. Kyu-hyun, being a good friend, encouraged him to take his feelings seriously if he truly believed that Nabi was the one for him. As they talked, Kyu-hyun shared his own relationship struggles, admitting that he was unsure if Bitna really liked him. He expressed his hope that they could establish a more solid connection. These words sparked a realization in Jae-yeon that Bitna might have been feeling the same way towards Kyu-hyun all along. Meanwhile, Nabi was busy sculpting a statue of Jae-yeon's face when Do-hyuk appeared and asked her for a walk, capturing the moment on video. Their time together brought them closer than ever before. Elsewhere, Jae-yeon was feeling despondent on his birthday and sought out Sola for comfort. It was then that Sola finally confessed that she had lied to Nabi about their relationship, not expecting that it would cause Nabi to disappear for so long. Jae-yeon had a sinking feeling in his stomach when he discovered that Sola was the one who caused Nabi to disappear. He desperately tried to reach out to Nabi, but she wouldn't answer his calls. Feeling helpless, Jae-yeon decided to meet with his mother, who had a luxurious present waiting for him, a fancy car for his birthday. However, his mother's words struck a chord with him, and he realized that he had been blind to his mistakes all along. He understood that true happiness can only come from learning how to love someone properly. Meanwhile, Nabi was lost in thought, trying to figure out whether she should respond to Jae-yeon's message or not. Suddenly, she received a picture message from Do-hyuk, a gift that she had given him in the past, and he still cherished it to this day. The following day, Do-hyuk took Nabi out for a bicycle ride to buy groceries, but unfortunately, her bike tire got punctured while they were returning. Luck was on their side, though, as Do-hyuk's cousin, Yang Do-yeon, showed up and offered to take care of Nabi's bike. Sensing that Do-hyuk had feelings for Nabi, she urged him to ride with her and assured him that she'd take care of the bike. As they arrived at Do-hyuk's place, he mustered up the courage to express his feelings to Nabi. However, their moment was abruptly interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Jae-yeon in his new car. Nabi was surprised to see him there, and Do-hyuk, noticing Jae-yeon's gaze fixed on Nabi, quickly stepped in and asked him what he was doing there. We're taken back a few moments earlier as Jae-yeon was engrossed in watching butterflies in his garden. Suddenly, he received an invitation message for an event in the city and quickly made his way there in his brand new car. Meanwhile, Nabi and Do-hyuk were enjoying their time walking around the lively marketplace. However, Jae-yeon had also arrived at the same market and was frantically asking locals for directions to the activity. To his dismay, he caught sight of Nabi walking alongside Do-hyuk. Seeing them so close and comfortable together left Jae-yeon feeling dejected and saddened, even though Nabi seemed happier than ever. As Nabi and Do-hyuk arrived at his house, he was about to confess something to her, but their moment was suddenly interrupted by the arrival of Jae-yeon. Nabi was taken aback by his sudden appearance. As Jae-yeon and Nabi locked eyes, Do-hyuk quickly introduced himself, and an uneasy tension filled the room. Fortunately, the tension dissipated as soon as a group of art students arrived at the house. It turned out that they had rented the place as a temporary residence for a few days, and the house was also being used as a location for their art activities. Bitna couldn't help but tease Nabi as she noticed the sparks flying between her and Do-hyuk. Unfortunately, her teasing ended up hurting Jae-yeon's feelings. Kyu-hyun, who knew how Jae-yeon felt, rushed to his side to console him. Meanwhile, Ji-won apologized to Nabi for not letting her know that Jae-yeon would be joining them. As Do-hyuk led the group to their room and began preparing for their barbecue, they all decided to hit the playground for some fun. However, things took a turn when Jae-yeon saw Do-hyuk. His mood instantly soured, and he only agreed to go if Nabi came with them. After everyone had left, Jae-yeon planned to drive Nabi home in his car. However, things quickly became awkward when Nabi decided to sit in the back, leaving Do-hyuk to sit next to Jae-yeon. The silence was deafening. Desperate to break the tension, Nabi brought up her recent encounter with Sola. She explained that Sola had expressed interest in talking to her about many things. However, when Nabi mentioned this to Jae-yeon, he remained stoic and unresponsive. At the playground, the group of art students was finally able to let loose and have some fun. However, things took a strange turn when Kyu-hyun started acting cold towards Bitna. Meanwhile, Do-hyuk took every opportunity to capture the happy moments they shared together, especially when Nabi was nearby. This didn't go unnoticed by Jae-yeon, who watched from a distance with a growing sense of jealousy. Nabi seemed to be constantly beaming with joy when she was around Do-hyuk. But things got complicated when they decided to ride the Ferris wheel. Despite Do-hyuk's desire to be with Nabi, he was asked to ride with Bitna instead. This left Nabi to ride with Jae-yeon, adding another layer of tension to the already complicated situation. As Do-hyuk snapped pictures of Bitna, Kyu-hyun couldn't help but stare at her with mixed emotions, though he was hesitant to take a picture with her himself. Meanwhile, Nabi and Jae-yeon were riding in silence, with Nabi preferring to take in the scenery around her. Sensing an opportunity, Jae-yeon teased Nabi, trying to break the tension between them. Elsewhere, Yoon-sol noticed that Ji-won was afraid of heights and quickly took action to comfort her. Holding Ji-won's hand, Yoon-sol was able to ease her fear, causing Ji-won to become more relaxed and comfortable. Jae-yeon's constant glances towards Nabi prompted her to ask him why he was staring. He confessed that he felt hurt when Nabi didn't acknowledge his birthday, despite him wanting her to wish him a happy birthday. Nabi remained silent in response. After their fun at the playground, they returned to Do-hyuk's place where they met his cousin, Do-yeon. Do-yeon was immediately drawn to Jae-yeon's good looks and charm, and the two struck up a conversation. Nabi couldn't help but feel envious as she watched them talk while they prepared food. When Do-hyuk arrived with his camera, Ji-won had already started knocking back drinks even though they hadn't finished their meal. Meanwhile, Kyu-hyun remained focused on the grilled meat, ignoring Bit-na's attempts to feed him. Sensing tension in the air, Bit-na approached Nabi and asked why she was avoiding Jae-yeon. Nabi revealed that Jae-yeon had a girlfriend and urged Bit-na to stay away from him. Bit-na was stunned by the news and found it hard to believe that Jae-yeon could be taken. When Nabi attempted to wash vegetables, Do-hyuk jumped in to help, sparking jealousy in Se-hoon, who assumed they were in a romantic relationship. Jin-soo prodded Do-hyuk for more information, leading him to reveal that Nabi was his childhood friend and first love. The group was stunned by his confession, but Nabi herself was slightly irked by his blunt admission. As they resumed playing their game, Ji-won's excessive drinking led to Yoon-sol taking her inside. In a drunken stupor, Ji-won confessed her love for Yoon-sol, admitting that she saw her as more than just a friend. Yoon-sol reciprocated these feelings, but held back due to Ji-won's inebriated state and her reluctance to get her hopes up. As Do-hyuk busied himself with decorating the gathering spot, the others began to arrive. Jae-yeon's friends noticed a change in his demeanor, leading them to suspect that he had found a romantic partner. Bit-na, who already knew that Nabi was the object of Jae-yeon's affection, prodded him to reveal the identity of his newfound love. However, Kyu-hyun quickly intervened, steering the conversation in a different direction. Just as Jae-yeon was about to answer Bit-na's persistent questioning, Do-yeon suddenly dropped a glass and injured her hand. Nabi quickly came to her aid and suggested they head to the beach, where Do-hyuk had prepared a surprise firework display. Once they arrived, Do-yeon couldn't help but ask Nabi about her relationship with Jae-yeon, suspecting that he had feelings for her. Nabi revealed that during a previous game, Jae-yeon had whispered to her that he wanted to kiss her that very night. Nabi was taken aback by the truth behind the game question and tried to brush it off, considering heading to her aunt's house instead. As the group enjoyed the fireworks display, Do-hyuk snapped photos of the momentous occasion, while Bit-na attempted to approach Kyu-hyun. But Kyu-hyun dropped a bombshell, explaining that he had been avoiding Bit-na because he no longer wanted to be in a relationship with her. Bit-na was devastated by the revelation, feeling a mixture of surprise and sadness. When Do-yeon arrived at the beach, her cousin Do-hyuk was surprised to see her injured hand. He asked about their mutual friend Nabi, but Do-yeon informed him that Nabi had decided to return to her aunt's place. Meanwhile, at the inn, Jae-yeon noticed that Nabi's hand was also injured and offered to treat it. Nabi was hesitant to accept his help because she didn't want to rekindle their past romantic relationship. Despite her reluctance, Jae-yeon playfully teased her and urged her to be honest about her feelings. Nabi tried to resist his charms by reminding him that he already had a girlfriend, but Jae-yeon denied having one and asked Nabi to trust him. After some convincing, Nabi was won over by Jae-yeon's words and they shared a passionate kiss. However, their moment was interrupted by a call from Do-hyuk. Although Nabi initially ignored the call, she eventually realized that she couldn't give in to her feelings for Jae-yeon and chose to leave. Soon after, Do-hyuk arrived to share something important with Nabi. He led her to a beautifully decorated spot and confessed his feelings, asking her to be his girlfriend. However, Nabi was unable to respond as she was still reeling from her intimate moment with Jae-yeon. Overwhelmed with guilt, Nabi could only cry and reject Do-hyuk's heartfelt proposal. Though heartbroken, Do-hyuk accepted her decision and promised to support her in any way he could. Feeling even more ashamed of her actions, Nabi decided to leave. As Do-hyuk returned to the inn, he encountered Jae-yeon, who warned him not to complicate things with Nabi. But Jae-yeon then went on to claim that Nabi's hesitation towards Do-hyuk was because of him. In an emotional outburst, Do-hyuk revealed that Nabi had previously confided in him that she regretted her past with Jae-yeon and wanted to move on. The next day, Nabi woke up to a surprise visit from Jae-yeon, who had come to learn a pottery-making technique from her aunt Sabong. When Jae-yeon saw a picture of Nabi and Sabong together, Sabong immediately knew that he was the reason Nabi had come to stay with her. Nabi was upset that her aunt had welcomed Jae-yeon so warmly, but she reluctantly allowed him to stay for dinner. However, when Jae-yeon brought up their kiss from the previous day and asked about her relationship with Do-hyuk, Nabi told him it was none of his business. Hurt by her response, Jae-yeon decided to return to Seoul. The day after their drunken game night, Ji-won's friends ask if she remembers what happened. She can only recall playing the game, which leaves Yoon-sol feeling upset. Meanwhile, Nabi plans to return to Seoul, and Do-hyuk comes to bid her farewell and gives her some snacks. As she's about to leave, Do-hyuk confesses that he won't give up on her until she gets a new boyfriend. Nabi is taken aback by his words and doesn't respond. Meanwhile, Jae-yeon continues working on his project, still thinking about Nabi and wondering if she truly regrets their past. As the group of art students gathers for a meal, they confront Ji-won about his behavior the previous night. Ji-won confesses that he can't remember anything past playing a game, breaking Yoon-sol's heart. Meanwhile, at the end, Yoon-sol and Ji-won continue to avoid each other. Bit-na is also struggling with her relationship as she contemplates Kyu-hyun's decision to end things after only a short time together. Nabi, on the other hand, is torn between Jae-yeon and Do-hyuk as she returns to her apartment in Seoul. Jae-yeon confides in Kyu-hyun that things are still rocky between him and Na-bi, while Kyu-hyun reveals that he has ended things with Bit-na, leaving Jae-yeon surprised. Bit-na seeks solace in playing games after her breakup with Kyu-hyun. She confides in a friend that she thought dating meant kissing and sleeping together and realizes that this may have led to her being dumped. Meanwhile, Na-bi remembers Jae-yeon's words from their last encounter and decides to throw away his things. However, she receives a call from Do-hyuk, who tells her that he is coming to Seoul to meet her, and she cancels her plans to talk to Jae-yeon. The following day, Jae-yeon impresses a representative from a prestigious American university with his work. Na-bi's colleagues inquire about her preparations for the exchange student program, to which she confidently confirms that she has everything under control and will soon finish her project. Meanwhile, Jae-yeon surprises Na-bi at her workplace and asks her about her decision to move to America. She contemplates throwing away his belongings, but Jae-yeon insists on taking them. In a kind gesture, he offers to take Na-bi to an art gallery, but it turns out to be an exhibition of his ex-girlfriend, which triggers a traumatic response in Na-bi. Na-bi was honest with Jae-yeon and shared that the place they were in brought back painful memories for her. However, Jae-yeon had a different experience as he reminisced about meeting a stunning woman there. He believed it was fate when he ran into her again. Na-bi couldn't help but feel envious, assuming the woman he was referring to was Sol-ah. In another part of town, Ji-won approached Yoon-sol in hopes of reconciling, but Yoon-sol was still distant and kept her distance. Meanwhile, Bit-na was struggling with a broken heart and opted to spend the entire day at an internet cafe. During drawing class the following day, the students faced a dilemma when their model didn't show up. Jae-yeon was present and was asked to pose for the class. Na-bi was taken aback by the drawing session, which was conducted with Jae-yeon as the model. After class, Na-bi met with Do-hyuk, who had come to Seoul with her favorite food. He also showed her an edited video with the concept she had suggested. From a distance, Jae-yeon watched silently as Do-hyuk continued to gaze at Na-bi with a smile. Later, Do-hyuk visited Na-bi's art studio and was even more impressed with her work. However, when he inquired about her assistants, Na-bi only mentioned 2 juniors and didn't reveal their names. Little did he know that one of her assistants was actually Jae-yeon. After dropping Do-hyuk off at home, Na-bi bid him farewell, promising not to let him down. Unfortunately, shortly after, she received a message stating that she was not selected for the student exchange program. Na-bi was devastated by the news. Meanwhile, Ji-won was puzzled by Yoon-sol's sudden change in behavior until she remembered confessing her feelings while drunk. She decided to visit Yoon-sol and apologize for her actions. Yoon-sol, feeling guilty, admitted that she had feelings for Ji-won beyond friendship. However, Ji-won stopped her, revealing that she was unaware of Yoon-sol's feelings and walked away. As Do-hyuk arrives at the restaurant, his father notices his son's elated expression and learns that it's because he had just met Na-bi. Meanwhile, Na-bi is reminded of her memories with Jae-yeon while on her way home. She's shocked when she receives an incoming call from him, only to realize that he's standing right behind her. That night, Jae-yeon and Na-bi meet at the bar where they first encountered each other. Jae-yeon brings up seeing Na-bi with Do-hyuk earlier and asks her what she likes about him. Na-bi admits that Do-hyuk is a good man who understands her and makes her feel comfortable, but she's hesitant to pursue anything more because she doesn't reciprocate his feelings and doesn't want to disappoint him. Do-hyuk is overjoyed when he talks to Na-bi on the phone, but his colleagues at the restaurant are tired of seeing him glued to his cell phone. They urge him to meet her in person, and eventually, Do-hyuk agrees. Later, while Do-hyuk is in Seoul retrieving some of his belongings, he unexpectedly runs into Na-bi and her friend Jae-yeon. Jae-yeon, who is jealous of Do-hyuk's relationship with Na-bi, tries to make him jealous by going into Na-bi's room despite her asking him to wait outside. Do-hyuk is crushed and wishes he hadn't agreed to meet Na-bi again. Meanwhile, Bit-na is out drinking with friends and being pursued by several men, but she only has eyes for Kyu-hyun. At Na-bi's apartment, Jae-yeon is shocked to see that she still has the butterfly souvenir he made for her. Trying to gauge her feelings, he flirts with her and even tries to kiss her. But Na-bi rejects his advances, telling him she doesn't want to repeat the same mistake. Jae-yeon is hurt to learn that Na-bi sees their past relationship as a mistake. Desperate not to lose Na-bi, Jae-yeon asks her out on a date, surprising her. But Na-bi isn't sure if his words are sincere. Later, Na-bi receives a message from Do-hyuk asking to meet, but she decides not to go. Do-hyuk is crushed once again and returns home feeling hurt. On campus, Na-bi is caught in an awkward conversation with Yoon-sol when Ji-won shows up. The tension between them is palpable as they remember their previous conversation. Meanwhile, Do-hyuk's heartbreak is affecting his cooking, and the food he makes turns out poorly. He's torn about whether he should give up on his love or keep pursuing Na-bi. Elsewhere, Joo-hyuk asks Yoon-sol out on a date to an art exhibition, confessing that he's liked her since they first met. But Yoon-sol can't accept, as she's already infatuated with Ji-won. Ji-won confides in Na-bi that he's unsure about dating Yoon-sol, fearing that a potential breakup would ruin their friendship. Jae-yeon headed to the professor's office with some documents to submit when she stumbled upon the list of students registered for the exchange program. She was shocked to discover that Na-bi's name was not included. Professor So, who was not pleased with Na-bi's work, criticized her during a presentation for not being able to convey the right emotions. Despite being talented and having Jae-yeon as her assistant, Na-bi failed to impress her lecturer. This made Na-bi feel extremely upset. Meanwhile, Do-hyuk was working on his latest video project when he stumbled upon some footage of Na-bi that reminded him of her passion and hard work. He decided to reach out to her, but Na-bi was struggling to improve her work and feeling lost. When Jae-yeon noticed Na-bi's struggles, she wanted to help, but Na-bi received a call from Do-hyuk, and Jae-yeon chose to step back. Feeling left out and abandoned, Jae-yeon realized that Na-bi had distanced herself from him. Na-bi shared with Do-hyuk that she had failed to make it through the exchange program and that her work had not met the mark. Do-hyuk was able to comfort Na-bi and lift her spirits up. Yoon-sol and Ji-won found themselves in the park, where Ji-won finally confessed his worries to Yoon-sol. She was relieved to learn that Ji-won felt the same way, and she assured him that she would never leave him, no matter what. Later that night, the two of them officially started dating. Meanwhile, Na-bi was preparing to head home when Jae-yeon offered to take her home and gave her a handmade bracelet as a gift. Na-bi started to feel that Jae-yeon was serious about their relationship this time, but she still hesitated to open her heart to him again. The next day, Bitna invited her friend to an internet cafe where Kyu-hyun worked, hoping to make him jealous. However, Kyu-hyun was indifferent to Bitna's attempts. Do-hyuk received a collaboration offer from an agency because his video had gone viral. During the meeting, he bumped into Jae-yeon, who was with Sola. Sola had met with Jae-yeon to let him know that she was returning to the United States. She didn't want to fall in love with him again, so she decided to leave. Before parting ways, Sola asked Jae-yeon for one last hug. Meanwhile, Na-bi was feeling frustrated with her campus issues when Yoon-sol came to visit her. Na-bi revealed that she already knew about Yoon-sol and Ji-won's relationship. When Yoon-sol asked about Na-bi's relationship with Jae-yeon, Na-bi admitted that they were not compatible. Returning to Bitna, she was frustrated with Kyu-hyun for not delivering her order, but when she saw his phone, she discovered her contact name was My Sunshine, making her excited. It turned out Kyu-hyun was secretly still thinking about her. When he returned, Bitna teased him and asked him on a date. Meanwhile, Na-bi was eating with her assistant during a project meeting when Jin-soo asked about her relationship with Jae-yeon. Na-bi was annoyed, and Jae-yeon, who had just arrived, overheard. Bitna opened a package she had received and found a couple's keychain, and decided to get back together with Kyu-hyun, knowing they still loved each other. As Na-bi finished up her dinner, her phone rang. It was Do-hyuk, and he wanted to meet up with her. Little did she know, Jae-yeon overheard their conversation. When Na-bi met Do-hyuk, he wasted no time in giving her the photos he had taken and an umbrella to shield her from the rain. As they strolled and chatted, Do-hyuk dropped a bombshell. He had seen Jae-yeon entering Na-bi's house earlier. Na-bi was taken aback by the news. Despite his concerns, Do-hyuk genuinely wanted Na-bi to be happy. However, he couldn't help but question Jae-yeon's sincerity, especially since he had seen him with another woman before. So, he asked Na-bi if she was absolutely sure that Jae-yeon's feelings for her were genuine. As Jae-yeon walked alone in the rain, his heart heavy with sorrow, he rushed home to find solace. When Na-bi arrived at her house, she was startled to see a drenched and intoxicated Jae-yeon waiting for her. In his drunken state, Jae-yeon expressed his jealousy and lashed out at Na-bi with hurtful words. Emotionally charged, Na-bi told Jae-yeon that she regretted being with him and that their entire relationship had been a mistake. Hearing those painful words, Jae-yeon could only remain silent, confirming Do-hyuk's earlier warning that Na-bi had grown weary of their relationship. The argument left Jae-yeon feeling hurt, while Na-bi was left to cry herself to sleep that night. The following day, Na-bi reflected on the words Jae-yeon had spoken, ultimately deciding to work alone without the help of Jae-yeon or Jin-soo. When she encountered Jae-yeon, she gave him a sarcastic look before quickly walking away. Ji-won, Yoon-sol, and Se-hoon were together when Se-hoon saw the person he liked making out with his friend. He could only bear witness to the heartbreaking sight. Soon after, Bitna called Se-hoon, requesting that he send her some files from her laptop. Se-hoon asked for the password, which Bitna shouted out in frustration, Kyu-hyun, God's sexiest creation. Embarrassed, Bitna's friends discovered that she was dating Kyu-hyun, and he proceeded to tease her about the password. That same night, Na-bi and Jae-yeon were still thinking about their argument from the previous day. The next morning, tragedy struck when the fan above Na-bi's artwork came loose and destroyed her work. Devastated, Na-bi realized that the exhibition was only a few days away, leaving her with little time to fix the damage. Jae-yeon was looking through his things when he got a call from Yoon-sol, informing him about the tragedy that happened to Na-bi's work. Without wasting time, he rushed to the campus and found Na-bi in a state of panic. Yoon-sol urged Na-bi to start over and fix everything before the upcoming exhibition, and Jae-yeon promised to help her but also said he would keep his distance afterward. They worked tirelessly on recreating the piece, and after days of hard work, Na-bi's work was finally complete and looked amazing. Jae-yeon kept his promise and stayed away from Na-bi, bidding her farewell with a heavy heart. Na-bi couldn't help but cry, feeling disheartened even though her work was now finished. Just before leaving, Jae-yeon asked Jin-soo to give his book to Na-bi as a parting gift. As soon as Jae-yeon returned home, he released the butterflies he had been keeping captive. This action troubled Na-bi even more because Jae-yeon had completely disappeared with all his belongings. It turned out that he had planned to leave for the United States, which was the reason for his sudden goodbye. Na-bi couldn't stop thinking about him, while elsewhere, Do-hyuk was becoming more and more popular for his restaurant. Na-bi intentionally went to see him and invited him to her upcoming art exhibition. At first, Do-hyuk was interested, but when he found out that Jae-yeon was the project assistant for the exhibition, his expression changed immediately. In the evening, as Na-bi searched for the clothes she wore to her art exhibition, she stumbled upon a book left by Jae-yeon. As she flipped through the pages, she was stunned to find a picture of herself, the woman Jae-yeon had been describing to her all along. This realization dawned on her that Jae-yeon had truly fallen in love with her. Motivated by this discovery, Na-bi tried to reach out and connect with Jae-yeon, but all her efforts were in vain. As the day of the art exhibition approached, Na-bi and her team worked tirelessly to prepare for the event. Meanwhile, Jae-yeon finally decided to attend the exhibition and witness Na-bi's work. The exhibition was a great success, with Na-bi's elegant work drawing and admiring glances from everyone, including her friends. As Na-bi waited for someone, she received a call from her lecturer who commended her work, saying that it exceeded her expectations. The lecturer even suggested that Na-bi should consider applying for the student exchange program in Paris. Later in the afternoon, Do-hyuk arrived and apologized for being late due to a video shoot. Soon after, Jae-yeon also showed up, but upon seeing Na-bi with Do-hyuk, he quickly left. Na-bi tried to catch up with him, but he had already disappeared. Do-hyuk approached Na-bi and asked about her feelings for Jae-yeon. She confessed that she actually had feelings for him. Surprisingly, Do-hyuk accepted her decision and thanked Na-bi for making him feel the overwhelming power of love. During a gathering of art students, they began discussing who fell in love first between Bit-na and Kyu-hyun. Kyu-hyun confessed that he had developed feelings for Bit-na before she did. Later, Na-bi headed back to the gallery and saw Jae-yeon admiring her work. She approached him and playfully scolded him for his past behavior as a womanizer. Despite this, Na-bi found comfort in being around Jae-yeon and asked him to stay by her side. She even invited him to date, knowing the risk that came with it. As time passed, Jae-yeon remained a sought-after man among women, but he chose Na-bi as his partner in true love. Na-bi, in turn, was certain of her feelings for Jae-yeon and no longer wavered even in the presence of Do-hyuk. The series conveys a valuable lesson that love may come to us as fate, but it's also essential to put effort into fighting for it. It's like catching a bus. When it arrives at our stop, we have to make a move and step onto it. In other words, we need to seize the opportunity to make the most of our chance at love.